This episode of New Politics was released on the 24th of July, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
Is the appeal of Pauline Hanson starting to go downhill? And can she still claim to represent Australian battlers while travelling overseas with billionaires and far-right activists? One nation's greatest threat isn't immigration, wokeness or mysterious globalists. The greatest threat to one nation is Pauline Hanson herself. I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
And if you're listening in and haven't subscribed to our website at New Politics, you're missing out on half of what we do. There's regular articles and analysis of this strange world of politics. It's all free, and you can subscribe at newpolitics.com.au. And of course, if you do want to support us, it's just $5 per month at Patreon and Substack, and all of this is a good way to support independent journalism.
Adulation in England for Australia's very own far-right firebrand.
And do not apologise for being white.
Addressing a half-empty room at the CPAC conference with a familiar list of grievances.
30% of Australians are born overseas. In Australia, we've gone completely woke. And the other thing that is destroying our nation is net zero.
Pauline Hanson also taking aim at transgender rights in Australia.
You got it right in Britain, and I'm glad you did. We're too stupid over there.
As Pauline Hanson wraps up her controversial European tour, at home the coalition's hoping the more Australians hear what one nation has to offer, the less they'll like it.
We suggested this some time ago, David, that one nation may have already reached its high watermark, and we also suggested that the biggest danger to Pauline Hanson is Pauline Hanson herself, and so it proved to be the case this week by going overseas to slag off Australia. Now, the support for One Nation is falling consistently across several opinion polls, and I think this is starting to expose that massive gap between Pauline Hanson's enormous media profile, and there's no question about that. She's got this massive media profile, and One Nation's potential to actually end up in government. I think there's just this massive gap between those two issues, and going overseas to attack Australia and then say how terrible everything is in Australia probably isn't the best way to attract voters, but that's exactly what she did. She complained about how woke Australia is. There's too many Muslims, too much multiculturalism, too many transgender people, too much net zero, too many globalists, just too much of everything, David. But all this is doing is creating headlines, and that's about it. But attacking transgender people, that doesn't build any new houses. Complaining about multiculturalism doesn't improve hospitals or raise wages or reduce the cost of living. And while Hanson claims to represent Australian battlers who have been abandoned by the elites, there she was gallivanting all around Europe, appearing alongside convicted far-right activist Tommy Robinson and hanging out at an exclusive Italian hotel with her best mate, the mining billionaire Gina Rinehart. Now, David, in politics, you can be one or the other. You can be the champion of the battler or the champion of the billionaire, but you cannot be both. That's the point. And maybe that's the contradiction that a lot of people are finally starting to realise.
I think the transgender thing is really interesting because there's a lot of grandparents who ostensibly are in Hanson's demographic. And of course, I'm not saying everybody over a certain age votes for Hanson, but I do think it is fair to say that her demographics skew to the more mature end or the older end of the population. And of course, a lot of these grandparents now have transgender grandkids who they dote upon. And then to hear somebody like Pauline say it's wrong and it's unnatural and you lose that audience. Someone pointed out that she called for the defunding of SBS and the dismantling of SBS right in the middle of the World Cup, reading the room really well with the most popular sporting event in the world. I can't say, I didn't watch it myself, but a lot of people watched it. It's that Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, everyone's bad, everyone's coming to get you. Your privilege isn't privilege. Other people can say whatever they like about you, but you can't say it back. Free speech, woke, everyone's out to get me. I'm not paranoid. It's just everyone is out to get me type stuff.
Well, they are, David. They really are.
Yeah. And after a while, this stuff becomes one wearing, as Albo rightly pointed out. When he goes overseas, he tries to promote Australia. And that's true of, I think, every Prime Minister and every leader of the opposition and every foreign minister and every politician who's had to go overseas. Maybe in private, they've had things to say, but when they're in front of a crowd, they were promoting Australia. Even Paul Keating, when he called Australia the arse end of the world, he was talking about influence and context. He went out and made some very good trade deals. He went out and pushed Australia and showed the best parts of Australia, which there are some. And the other thing too is, what is globalism? Nobody who critiques it in that way says what it is, except that it's the United Nations and the World Health Organization. And I don't know, I might be a little bit oversensitive here, but it seems to me that the United Nations helps a lot of countries in the third world, helps a lot of disadvantaged people who aren't necessarily of the same background of Pauline Hanson and the like. There's a racial or a racist quality to these claims that globalization sure didn't help the people it was meant to, but it's not because of the poorer people in the world who forced it. It's the rich billionaires who are more interested in shoveling money upwards than downwards.
Oh, that's right. But it's also that Pauline Hanson, she's taken this very long list of grievances over to the UK. It was so long, I didn't think it was ever going to end, but it was blaming migration, there's blaming Muslims, transgender people, net zero, and these mysterious globalists for, like, all of these people are being blamed for the national decline. And I'm just wondering who these globalists are and what they actually look like, because I've never actually seen any of them and I don't know where they live. Maybe Pauline could tell us where they are. But I just think that it's time to get real about all of this, David. You know, multiculturalism and wokeness. These people don't even know what that means anyway. No. But it's just easier to blame these unknown things than to blame the decades of austerity and privatisation, rising inequality, stupid decisions. I'm referring to the UK here, but also stupid decisions such as Brexit. And in Australia, we didn't have Brexit, but it's all the same sort of thing. There are economic and political problems, but I don't think that there are social problems. All of these things like unaffordable houses, wages, poor public service, poor planning, this cannot be blamed on multiculturalism and wokeness. But everything in the minds of Pauline Hanson and One Nation, everything is identified as a threat except for the real threats themselves. And it's also such a weird thing to do. As you mentioned before, a politician going overseas to tell everyone about how bad Australia is. And it's hard to know what she's actually talking about, because within the top 10 most desirable cities in the world to live in, and there's over 4,000 cities in the world, Australia has got 3 cities, and that's Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide, in the top 10. That's one thing. What she's actually going out there to say is not actually factually correct. And the other point is that there wouldn't be too many politicians who would be able to get away with this, you know, going off overseas, slagging off Australia in such a way and then expecting to come back and get some more votes out of this.
It was such a bizarre, and it shows that nothing will ever be good enough too, unless she was living in a purely monoculture, and she's since spent a lot of time trying to deny that she wants to live in a monoculture. Presumably she likes the Chinese bistro down at the local RSL. But
once things are good enough, David, that's when the game is up for One Nation and for Pauline Hanson.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Everything is never going to be good enough. That's the issue.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing too is that we didn't have Brexit, but we had the Voice to Parliament referendum, which was Australia's Brexit. Maybe less disastrous in that we can still fix that easily, and it didn't have the economic effect that Brexit did. But it showed a certain element in Australia where the small-mindedness comes through. And yeah, Pauline Hanson going across and calling Australians stupid. Now, there is going to be a small proportion of her polity that say, oh, yeah, no, she's absolutely right. Australians are stupid. Look at how Muslims are taking over the country and look at how Aboriginal women and transgender. There's all of that. But she's not going to win any votes. And for them to become a serious political force that's not just filling in the gap that the Liberal Party has made while the Liberal Party sorts itself out, she's going to have to come up with ideas that include people, not exclude. So anyone who was thinking, oh, Pauline Hanson, mate, some of the stuff she says is all right, and she says Australians are stupid, maybe not. And again, there's that whole thing about how our attitudes are changing towards transgender people. I'm not saying, if you're listening and you're trans, I'm not saying it's any easier for you, but things are changing, I think. It's probably a generational thing. Of course, Pauline is, 73 or 74 or something. She doesn't have to worry about the next generation. She'll be out of politics in the next 5 or 10 years, and Australia will go on without her. Again, we can go back to Brexit. The majority of people who voted in Brexit, yes, have since died of old age.
Well, it was 10 years ago as well.
It was 10 years ago, yeah. And so the numbers that they got are now, if they were to hold another referendum, I can't see Andy Burnham wanting to hold a referendum given how well the last one went. But the numbers suggest that Britain would re-enter the European Union. Much reduced, of course, in a much worse position. And in fact, it may even be not worth rejoining.
And one other factor that I've noticed is that we've been talking about One Nation and Pauline Hanson, but we've also got the National Party copying One Nation as much as possible, and so much copying going on that the National Party was actually at the same CPAC conference in the UK. And Senator Bridget McKenzie, she was there at the CPAC conference and almost using exactly the same language and saying that we need to declare war on left-wing globalists, there needs to be a war on mass migration, and of course the big one, there needs to be a war on woke institutions. And David, I've had a good look around and I can't see these woke organisations. Where are they? Maybe that's where all these left-wing globalists work. They're all in these woke organisations. But I think this is a bigger issue because the National Party, whatever we might think about it, it's seen as or should be seen as a serious political player. And they've actually frequently been in government as part of the coalition since they were formed in 1923 or 24 or whenever it was. So during that time, the National Party, in whatever name they've had in the past, Country Party, National Party, whatever, they've been in government or part of government for 70% of the time since around 1923, 24. So they're not really meant to be a fringe player, but this is exactly what they're doing. They're behaving like this sort of idiot fringe dwelling political party and just copying One Nation in this way. You think what's going to be next? Is Bridget McKenzie going to dye her hair orange to match up to Pauline Hanson? But you're just wondering what they're actually doing at the National Party, and that goes for the Liberal Party too. But you just think that after a few crushing election defeats that they've had, 2022 and 2025, and probably got another one coming up in 2028, that they just give up on this culture war garbage and stop chasing Pauline Hanson. She's got that market sewn up. I don't think it's a big part of the electorate, even though the polling suggests that it's around 21, 22% at the moment. I think that that's going to drop off. But the point is, all of this stuff about going overseas and indulging in your own ideological pursuits, that's really self-indulgent. And I just feel that it's time to stop chasing this culture war garbage, stop chasing Pauline Hanson and get on with your own agenda.
Yeah, exactly. It's a view of the world that doesn't live up to the evidence of what the world gives you. Is the world perfect? By no means. But is it not perfect because of essentially powerless people? No. The fact that we have mass migration, presumably, suggests that people want to move to Australia because they like the opportunities it provides, the climate, the cost of living, the political freedom. The fact that people like Pauline Hanson are opposed to immigration suggests that she doesn't want people to have the opportunity, the cost of living, the freedom. You know, she doesn't ever disparage immigration from New Zealand, from the United Kingdom, from Canada, from the United States. It's always Muslim immigration. Lebanese immigration, as we've said before, has been here since about the 1880s. It's either a very, very long plan that was meant to survive 8 or 10 generations, or they're not very good and not very organised, or it's never been the plan. Same with the Chinese takeover of Australia. It's nearly 200 years old.
We're still waiting. Any minute now, David.
Yeah. I suppose, it was the globalist Mao who changed this thing. That's still 70 years old. Again, things don't stand up to scrutiny once you look into it. Are there people from overseas who break the law and go to jail? Yes, but in a much smaller proportion of their population to people who were born here. And that includes that if your parents or grandparents came here, it's still a much smaller proportion of those populations who go to jail, for example. So again, when you bring in facts, when you bring in data, when you bring in evidence, things start to not stack up in the way that Pauline would like them to stack up. And Pauline's not the only one, but she's the figurehead. And you can't argue with someone whose mind is made up and will not change, but you can outflank them electorally.
This is New Politics, independent analysis of Australian and international politics. For more free articles and analysis, join us at newpolitics.com.au.
And there's also the issue about who paid for Hanson's European and UK trip as well. And she claimed that it didn't cost taxpayers 1 cent. That might be correct. We don't know. But she doesn't actually explain who funded it or facilitated it or what will appear on her parliamentary disclosures. Now, she doesn't have to reveal that right away. She's got 28 days to declare it. But we've seen in the past that if politicians don't update the parliamentary registry of expenses, well, nothing at all happens. And so as far as who funded this, I think it is important to know who did provide the funds for this. So it was either Gina Rinehart or Seven West Media, or probably both, that paid for these trips. But Hanson, she's the sort of self-proclaimed champion of the forgotten battlers. She was photographed at an exclusive Italian hotel with Gina Rinehart, and we always have to be careful about what we say about Gina Rinehart because she is listening into every word that we say. And
hello, Gina.
Yeah, hello, Gina. I hope you're having a good time listening into our podcast today. But poolside with Gina Rinehart and then off to the Dolce & Gabbana fashion event, also in Italy. And Hanson can choose whichever company she wants to keep. But there's a massive contradiction going on here, which is what I mentioned at the top of the episode. The massive contradiction, swanning around with the billionaire class, going off to a fashion show. Sure, you can go and do that. Going off to the fashion show with the billionaire class, that's probably not the best way of keeping the votes of the battlers.
Dolce & Gabbana too, not known for their cheap, accessible clothing for the working person.
Absolutely, but she's very happy to attack migrants, very happy to attack Muslims, transgender people, never say anything at all about corporate power, and she is actually supported and in the pockets of the billionaire class. And I think this is a massive contradiction that cannot be bridged.
Yeah, and a friend of mine the other day talking about Nigel Farage, but he's exactly right. He said, what is it about these grifters that use populism and being part of the working class and the non-elite? They all end up rorting the system for as much luxury living and highbrow living as they can. Yeah. And Pauline Hanson might have a private interest in clothing and always wanted to go to a fashion show, and she paid for it out of her own pocket, and it's a bucket list thing. That's none of our business.
It's not our business, but it is our business in the public interest.
It is our business if she's saying that doesn't like the establishment and then turning up with establishment people. Of course, Gina Rinehart, to a certain group of people, comes across as being one of them.
Well, of course, and I can't imagine her going over to the UK and complaining about Gina Rinehart and all the billionaires in Australia in the same way she's complaining about Australia itself.
Imagine if Larissa Waters went over to a international Greens conference and got up and said, Australia's really stupid. We spend all our money on mining and defence and not on education and health, and we're just stupid, and it's too many vested interests in the government forcing legislation to... She'd be hammered from pillar to post, even though her argument might be more defensible. And of course she wouldn't. She'd get up and say Australia has a lot of challenges, but on the plus side, we've got the largest amount of national park. We've brought in very stringent building laws, etc., etc. She then might mention what we'd like to see a bit more, but she wouldn't do that litany of whinging and complaint. Neither, as he rightly said, would Anthony Albanese. And I'm going to be really fair here, I suspect Angus Taylor wouldn't either.
I think we're being really fair there, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, but
we are fair people.
It doesn't mean we agree with what any of them would say, but I can't see Angus Taylor getting up and saying, Australians are really stupid. And immigration's a problem, and I just can't see it.
Well, they might talk about those issues domestically, but possibly not going overseas to do that. They wouldn't do that in an international
that's what I mean.
forum.
I wouldn't expect that, and they'd be rightly hammered, and they'd be rightly criticised, and they'd be rightly excoriated. And if it's too dumb for Angus Taylor, it's pretty dumb, given some of the more risky approaches they've taken to political messaging in the last few months.
I don't want to see this anti-Semitism that's going on. I don't want to see the hatred that's happening. And I just feel that, that's why I'm very strong. On certain countries, you've got to say no. And I've got to...
I mean, is that... In a way, though, that is a version of a white Australia policy, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's got nothing to do with that. That's not to do with the white Australia policy at all. So don't go there with me, I'll tell you what, because I won't stand for it.
And that was an exchange between the editor of the West Australian, Christopher Dorr, and Pauline Hanson over in Perth, and it seems like they had quite a rowdy audience over there. But generally the contradictions and the denials just keep coming. Now, Pauline Hanson did claim that dismantling the white Australia policy was where everything all started going wrong, and probably everything started going woke, in her opinion. Yet she denies saying that she wanted to restore the white Australia policy. Now, sure, it might not be a name, it might be a different name, but that's exactly what she wants to do. She does want to ban specific non-European people from coming to Australia, which is exactly what the white Australia policy was, and now she denies that she wants it to be returned. She also said that she's sick and tired of having to apologise about being white. And I might have missed it, David, but I can't remember anyone asking her to apologise for being white. So a lot of this stuff might be going on inside her head. She also wants to implement an American-style ICE force and implement more of Donald Trump's policies, even though the last politician who tried to mimic Donald Trump in Australia, and that was Peter Dutton, was thoroughly trounced at the last election. So she also did a bit of victim blaming during the week by suggesting that women contribute to domestic violence by saying that it's a two-way street. And just as a comparison, around 14,000 women have been hospitalised by their male partners over the past 2 years, and the figures are not entirely clear, but around 1,000 men have been hospitalised over the past 2 years in domestic violence, and some of those incidents actually involve male partners. So it doesn't sound like too much of a two-way street. I think it's more like a one-way street. And it's not just Pauline Hanson, David. Here's Barnaby Joyce, who engaged in a bit of man bites dog story.
You're defending your leader, but are you really comfortable with where she is taking you?
I think... Sit down! Sorry, it's a dog.
It has left, naturally, many wondering exactly what was going on. So Barnaby joins us now, along with his dog Stella, live in Danglemar, New South Wales. Barnaby, thank you for coming on and clearing this all up. Is Stella there with you?
Yeah, Stella, you can see her, can't you? Oh, Stella, you're famous, darling, aren't you? Yes.
Oh.
Sit down politely.
Sounds like she's back in the good books this morning. Tell us exactly what was going on during that interview that made you snap. What was Stella doing?
And that exchange, I think, it's quite a simple exchange, but I think it just explains why One Nation continues to get away with all of this garbage. The media totally focused in that exchange. The media totally focused on Joyce shouting at his dog. Whether there was actually a dog there or not is a different question, but they focused on him shouting at a dog rather than some of the ridiculous things that he said about One Nation's policy. And I'm not even sure if shouting at your dog on national television is a vote winner anyway, but the media might gloss over everything that's coming out of One Nation, all of its White Australia policy stuff and all that sort of material, or barking at a dog live on television. But I don't think the public is glossing over this sort of stuff. And that's why the opinion poll numbers for One Nation are dropping off.
You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat an animal, I think. And it wasn't just him telling the dog to shut up. It was the visceral rage underneath it that I think responded to people. I saw a little bit of commentary on social media, and this is all anecdotal, where women and men said they got that feeling from abusive partners or abusive parents the same feeling when he told the dog, as you said, if there was a dog, to sit down. He's clearly not fit at the moment for public life and has never really been fit for public life. He's got a history too. He wanted to destroy Pixie and Boo, Johnny Depp's dogs, as relevant minister, not as a case officer, but as minister. He wanted to show how big a man he was by getting rid of two, I think they're toy poodles.
Yeah, that's right. It seems like he's got anger management issues and also canine management issues going on there.
Yeah, I hope the dog is all right. And it makes you wonder how his wife and family get treated. Now, there's been I'm not even speculating here, but it would be natural for some people to think if he treats the dog like that, and I get that feeling, how is he treating his wife and family? Again, we don't know, and I'm not commenting, but image is everything in politics. And if people get that sense that he's not the most generous husband, that can hook into your electability too.
Well, the other factor is that this ended up being a side issue. Instead of talking about the White Australia policy that seemingly the One Nation wants to bring back, or all of their ridiculous policies, the media then focus on the dog. Whether it was there or not, that's a side issue anyway, but they focus on the dog rather than these insane policies from One Nation. And that's how they continuously get away with it.
And we note too that it came at a point where Sarah Ferguson was asking some quite pointed and difficult questions. The relish in which, say, John Howard would take on difficult questions, or Paul Keating would take on difficult questions. Paul Keating would tell you if it was a stupid question, but if it was a good question that was tough, he would answer it, and he would happily enter into the debate of whether it was good or not. So would John Howard.
Oh, for sure. And I can imagine that a lot of these politicians in media appearances probably were hoping that there was a dog that would appear in the room so that they could shout it.
Yeah.
As a deflection, of course.
Yeah. He shows time and time again that he's not suited for public life. And until the party that keeps hiring, in this case, the One Nation, realises this, and the National Party realised this, which is a good thing for them, the more damage he's going to do to the brand and the more he's going to bring down the standard of political debate in Australia.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month, and we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.